Okay, cool. So hi everyone, this is Sajid again from Discover Coworking. With me, I have today Brendan from Sacred Spaces. He is based out of Palo Alto, California, the birthplace of, I think, the Silicon Valley, if I'm not wrong. Apple is based out of there. HP, I think HP Garage or HP started there as well. What I'm really excited about is that Brandon is from or was in New York, and then I think he moved to Palo Alto. At least that's what I've learned from his LinkedIn profile. So I'm very excited to find out uh, what's what took him to California, one coast to the other coast, and what he's doing in California and Palo Alto. With that, Brendan, please, thank you for coming. Please tell us your story.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. I'm honored to be able to share it and everything. I used to live in New York, originally from Central Coast of California. I moved out to New York. I was working for an economic development company that provided access to underserved entrepreneurs. And so I worked right off Broad Street and Wall Street area in the financial district. But I decided to move back to the West Coast to be closer to family. And part of that was also a response to this desire to want to become more entrepreneurial. So my whole career I'd served entrepreneurs by providing access to capital. And I wanted to take a step into really empathizing more with their journey. And it just so happened that that journey started with this idea of creating a co-working spaces in historic churches. And so it's kind of a left field idea, but how it came for me was addressing my own pain point. I moved out here. I was remote working out of my house, at the same time volunteering at a church I was attending. Saw that it was not being used Monday through Friday like the majority of these religious organizations. And in Palo Alto, where real estate is a premium, just like New York, it made me really think, okay, well, why can't we try to create community here, and what would that look like Monday through Friday? Why do I have to sit in my house all day long? Why can't I meet my neighbors, and can this building be used in a way that would lower our overhead? So. I had a relationship. I had an in. I'm a board member now of this church. So we spent months formalizing this concept of actually just revitalizing the interior of the building to make it modernized. The essentials of the Wi-Fi to the conference rooms, all that things. But it's been a real interesting niche to fill. And I can go into the business model of it, but at the end of the day, it's doing, I think, what these organizations should do, which is provide for a need in the community that they're embedded in.
Fabulous. I love the story. I think you have found this bluish ocean type of area, which is church. Who would have thought?
Hmm.
So can you share more? Like walk us through. Okay, fine. You have this idea, and then how did you convince the church board or the pastor? Because I think churches are non-profit organizations. So I'm sure they have
Right.
a governing board and ED. So please share more.
Yeah, so I think I convinced them first by building a relationship with them. Just like they're these organizations aren't known to move quickly, but interesting trends are that many churches are in crisis. Many religious organizations are in crisis because of the culture has changed and they haven't changed with it, and so they don't have the centralization in the community as they used to. So they're actually more open to new ideas, to becoming more useful. So I saw that trend. I had those conversations. At the same time, I started seeing some trends with entrepreneurship. I referenced a Kaufman Foundation report that was in Inc. magazine saying that entrepreneurship is actually declining in many ways. in relation to overall how many businesses there are there in the economy. And there's several reasons for that. It's just the cost of starting a company in some ways have increased. If you're very talented, it's easy, at least here in the Valley, just to work for one of the tech companies. The cost of office space continues to increase dramatically. The forces on our lives of family and having to just survive have increased. So there's these trends of workforce that's willing to try new things. A workforce that's much more, in many ways, demanded to be more flexible, right? So I saw that a lot of the neighbors here had the possibility of working in a new setting, and I saw that the church, or many of these churches, have the opportunity just to open their doors at no cost to them, get good Wi-Fi in, a couple of desks and seats, and allow the community again to feel cared for. So I saw it as just a win-win.
So, before we hopped on the call, obviously I did a little bit of research on your co-working space, and I
Mm.
saw, different plans and programs, obviously. So walk us through in terms of the types of membership you have. I think the hot desks are free, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so anyone can drop in and just use that. Do they have to reserve in advance, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a reservation system for the desk, for the conference rooms, to book events. So we do definitely ask people to do that just to guarantee that they have a place. It's not necessary if they want to drop in, and so that's. But we do add that functionality is just a way to secure some type of certainty. We do make it somewhat of a freemium model. It's all suggested donation as well. The interesting aspect of a historic church is there's a lack of debt or overhead, and so we don't have to play with the same funding model as I would if I bought like or rented like a traditional commercial office space and had $10,000, $15,000 in rent. That's not. I don't have to deal with the exact same overhead and rent here. So it brings in a different type of model, which is one of impact. So we again ask for suggested donation, mainly just to make sure that people are committed to reserving space if they want to make a donation. But all those donations actually go back into the facility to continue to evolve it, or back in the community itself. So it's a very much social enterprise in that regard. I'll give you an example.
Please do.
Two examples. Had some gentleman come in here saying, what, you can't have a co-working space without a ping pong table, right? And I was like, okay, well, if that's the case, why don't you make a donation of $50, and we'll match that donation of $50 or $100, and we'll get a ping pong table, right? You show a little bit of commitment, and we'll match that, and so that's something that we did. Someone else said, I run a company that helps men redo their wardrobe, right? And I made a connection with another company that employs single mothers at a boutique secondhand store that had needed higher end clothing. And so we said, well, if we're going to throw an event for you to be able to have men come in here and try on clothes, and you tailor them, and you're going to make thousands of dollars off that, we would ask that those men that came in here would also make a donation of their wardrobe that they're not using anymore to give to this social enterprise that employs single mothers. So the financial model is one of just, I think, mutual respect and some level of commitment, but it more importantly goes towards how to create a greater impact in the community. And I think that adds more purpose to the co-working space.
I love it, Brandon. I really, really love it. So now, 'cause I think you're creating something very unique, something I have not come across, and I'm glad we are. And it's funny because and I think if you watch all the videos that we are doing or all the recordings that I have done, it's like everyone I talk to, and I've been in this industry for over 5 years now. Everyone has something unique, and it's just so amazing. Like how
Mm.
we do things, or you all are doing things that something is so simple, but at the same time creating this impact and in a meaningful way.
Mm.
So now, churches. Now again, I'm gonna go back a little bit to architecture because I think a lot of I'm having trouble wrapping my head around it, and probably some other people watching this video are gonna also have this issue, which is churches are traditionally like long space with like benches. How did you make it co-working, and does it change on Sundays, or what's the walk us through, please?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting. I'd say change always comes with some level of friction, right? And that's where So here the building is actually segmented into three sections. One is a daycare. One is the historic church that was built back in the 50s. Some people told me not to call it historic when they're born in the 50s, but I call 50s historic. And then there's the new church, the sanctuary, the large, like with the pews. So there's three sections, and the co-working section started in the old church building, the fellowship hall, where like this church would like have meals and still does on the weekends. So to lay that out, there's two things there. There's first the uniqueness of these places of, you want to call them peace or worship or whatever, that you just can't build, today, right? That they bring a certain sense of stillness, even if you're not religious, and by no means there's a litmus test to come in here. There's no proselytization. It's just people, in my opinion, need a place to find just solitude or stillness or just authenticity. And these buildings were built in a way that I feel like many times helps with that. At the same time, the unique concept was one of not taking unused or sold off church buildings, but still ones that are active, that would be open to just creating a new purpose. And so that creates an opportunity to create a space that's multi-purpose, that has modular features in it. And so we actually set up and break down every Monday and Friday, but our desk and our furniture is all modular, and it's used in different ways, getting obviously wheels on everything. And there's been a little bit of expansion in the understanding what the interior is going to look like. But at the end of the day, it's just opening up new purposes in the same space and saying, look, like just because a space is used on Sunday this way doesn't mean it can't be used Monday through Friday in this way. How can we be respectful of these purposes? It's the same thing as if a conference room for us needs to be used as for this purpose, and then next it's a classroom, right? You set up and break down. You come up with new processes to make that more efficient, but it's possible.
Absolutely, I agree with you. By the way, the photo behind you, is that the photo of your church, or is that something else?
No, that's actually Stanford University.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I thought I
yeah.
asked you just, I see it behind you. I wasn't sure, you have that. Okay,
It's a
cool.
good
So,
guess.
um, shows how much I know about Stanford University.
Yeah, you got to come out this way. It's gorgeous.
I will someday, hopefully. So now, how do you do the conference rooms and the meeting space?
Yeah. So we like I wish I have photos, and I wish I could show them to you really quickly, but we say we went from relic to relevance with a lot of tenant improvements, taking out 30-year-old carpets and repainting the walls and putting up whiteboards and TVs. So we have a couple different conference rooms, one that sits 10 and one that sits about 20 people. And then we have one or two private, or actually two private offices, and looking at getting the telephone booths as well. But how do we do it? Yeah, we reserve the space. All the desks are modular that fit into make a larger conference table, but also make classroom environment. We're getting the next wave of furniture is all nesting, so it can all fold up and nest together against the wall and just open the space up. So we literally, our largest conference room turns into a daycare on Sunday morning, right? And it does that by the desk being able to nest and open up the space to be completely just an open space where parents can have their kids just play on the ground and things like that. But that's, yeah.
So that's a daycare on Sunday, but also you have daycare from Monday through Friday as well.
Yeah.
So now then I guess my next question is going to be like, who is your member? Who's using your space? Because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of co-working space in and around your area. So tell us more.
Yeah, it's wisdom. I'm still seeking. Where do you like? Who should be your member? Where you should compete and where you should differentiate. We have the big co-working spaces here, RC, WeWork, or Spaces, Regents. They're all around us, and then there's some local ones. And I think so. There's a couple that have been our members. There's the intuitive member of those that have some association with the faith or with the church itself, and feel like they already come here on the weekend, and so there's over 500 people that come here on the weekend, and so there's several that can come on the weekday. So that's been one member, but we've been more and more intentional to reach out to all of our neighbors to let them know about the space. But being specific, again, with the institution is supposed to have values to aspire to actually serve more of the underserved workforce. And so what I mean by that is here in the Valley, it's very, it's a technology area that's very male dominated. And so we actually have a lot of women that come in here. So women are a majority of our membership. We also have targeted a lot of artists who can't afford space elsewhere and said, look, we want to create a space that there's art, right? We want to allow you to come in here at a subsidized cost that you can't afford. Again, a WeWork space to work on your business that's art focused. Social enterprises as well. And then the last one is actually workers in transition. So we get a lot of people that are transitioning from corporate to want to start a company, or just gotten laid off, and so just kind of like in a place of a lot of ambiguity. So those are overall our customers.
Very nice. Then that next question, obviously, it has to be marketing. How are these people finding out about your space? I mean, are they Googling it? Or are you doing an outreach? I mean, how far, from does a member come from? And what's the furthest they travel to get to your space?
Yeah, so one of the strategies that's really worked for us outside of just like being present on social media, on Google and Apple Maps, having a website that helps to create that conversion of, if that's their first experience of almost walking in the door, those are like baseline things that I think have been necessity. But I think what's really worked is a couple strategies. First, all the local coffee shops, everything, we have community boards. We post on there our flyers, and we highlight the fact that we're not competing against a local coffee shop. We're complementing, what they do. And so all of our members, we encourage them to go visit the coffee shop to have meetings and offsites. It's all walkable here. So we've really tried to form a relationship with the coffee shop instead of trying to compete against them. And that's been a good strategy of them just also, saying, hey, like, if you're going to stick around for 6 hours and only have one drink, maybe pop into that co-working space. That might be a better fit for you, right? So coffee shops being champions has been a great strategy here. I've also gone out and really targeted a lot of meetup organizers. and just looked on what kind of meetups are going on, attended their meetups, networked with the meetup organizers, and said, "Hey, look, we know that Palo Alto is an expensive place. We're willing to be extremely flexible with what you're doing. We're excited about it, and that's brought in a lot of membership as well with the meetup organizers, and then actually forming partnerships with the city as well. Again, we're unique in the sense that a church is actually stepping into this space. And so the city is excited to hear about it, and it's gotten us some good free PR, just again to get people's ears that we wouldn't typically be able to get any other way. And then I guess the last thing is we're looking at incorporating with more and more schools to offer some limited programs for teenagers that, again, are 1 degree of separation from a parent that stays at home or is a remote worker and wouldn't know about us any other way other than their kid says, wow, like, this space is cool and they offer this, and their parents come in and check it out. So
Very nice. I think I like your outreach strategy, and I think coffee shops works, and plus I think Palo Alto, being Palo Alto, real estate is super expensive. So coffee shops have they want empty chairs all the time.
yeah.
They want customers, but they don't want someone to sit there for 6 hours with one cup of coffee. Okay, great. So do you have a team, or is it just you? How are you hanging it? I mean, how are you managing all this stuff by yourself?
Yeah. Again, an interesting model of just the startup of bootstrapping. My working profession outside of this is I actually teach at a community college. I'm fortunate that I have a very flexible job there, and it gives me a lot of time on site here. But we also have done two things. There's pastoral staff that use the facility, and I just say, hey, get out of your corner office and come into the co-working space and sit, do work, meet new people, and just manage it for the day, right? So that's actually allowed us to not have to hire on anyone because we've already had staff that are just, again, working somewhere else in the building, and they come into the co-working space one day out of the week, and so it's shared responsibility. The other thing that we do is service in lieu of any type of payment. So if a member here today is looking at using the space about 15 days a week, we've gotten to know him fairly well. We trust him, and so instead of feeling obligated to give a donation, we'd love for you just to watch over the space, 2 days out of the month. And that's an agreement that he's like, well, I'm already sitting here working, might as well do that as well. So that's actually helped to keep costs pretty nominal in this time of just growing the space.
Now, technology-wise, and I only digress because obviously since you have members coming in and people booking the systems, technology-wise, how are you set up? I mean, given that you have such a lean and fat, innovative approach to managing the space, which I think is amazing. And also I think being in a church does help because people immediately start to think of giving first, although I think that's the mantra in that valley, right? Give first. So, but technology-wise, what are you doing there? I mean, how are you managing the reservations, things like that?
Yeah, so two things. First, I have a good buddy that designed out our back office to keep the reservations and to incorporate that into just Excel at this point. That's been helpful not to have to jump onto any type of third-party software on the reservation issue. As far as other technology, we're looking at integrating Kisi. I think that's how you say it, KISI, for all the electronic door things, right? And looking also to get some potential camera systems in here. And it all comes with the mentality of just keeping honest people honest. I think in this place, it's good spirited. We're not looking to create the corporate structure that I think a lot of people are trying to get away from. But it's more of just allowing us to open the space up more than we typically would, as well as we have the unique, I don't want to say liability, but we have a daycare here, so we have to be very, very mindful of the security around the daycare as well. So that those are the technology right now that we have.
No, for daycare, I mean, is it like, infant to a certain age, or is it open? Like, how do you manage that?
Yeah, so the daycare is 2 to 5. It's a for-profit company that the gentleman that owns it is also part of this church here, so we're all a part of the same organization. But it's actually interesting. It's rated the #1 daycare in Palo Alto. It's been around for 25 years, and they're at capacity. But they've enjoyed this concept so much they've actually opened up a couple spots specifically for parents that want to learn, want this model of integrating family and work, right? So this is us trying to, again, step into the fact that we have a unique asset here. There's been a couple parents that have come in and dropped off their kids and worked next door, and being able to take 15-minute breaks during the day to play with their kid, remember more what's life about more than just that next phone call. And so we're really wrestling with this understanding of work-life integration, and I think we're off to a good start with that.
I like that idea, Brandon. By the way, again, I'm going to go back to architecture just because something came up into my mind, and forgive me or some, but I'm pretty sure a lot of the viewers are going to have the same question: is power. It's like another thing, must-have thing for co-working spaces. I mean, if people are coming and working, I mean, how are you running power to different desks? I mean, you have modular desks, but what about electrical outlets? How did you solve that problem? I'm sure you have solved it. I just want to know, how did you solve it? Please tell us.
Yeah, I don't know if design thinking, I don't know if we've really solved the problem or just created a better problem. But we have vault ceilings here. We thought about running cords down from the top, but we felt like it just we lose the aesthetics. We've actually run lines with with coverings over them on the ground at this point, and so there's coverings that allow it for you won't trip or anything like that, and there's several wall outlets around the whole place, but yeah, it's that I would say is something that we're looking at, trying to make it a little less cumbersome. It's a tricky one to work with something that's more flexible, but at the same time not you don't lose the aesthetics, but you want the flexibility in making things modular. So that's a good question. I'd love to hear people's input on that. So.
Well, I'm glad I brought it up. At the same time, I probably, if any of our viewers have an idea on how Brandon can solve this power issue, please reach out and give him suggestions. I'm sure it's gonna help a lot of other people as well.
Mm.
But the next question, obviously, it's around coffee. Uh, I mean, I understand people may need to. Do you serve coffee? Do you have a kitchen in there that people can use, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we have a fully functioning kitchen, stove, everything, which I think is unique. I've been told that, at least in this area, that you have to get a certain permit or have like an open stoves, and so this just being able to grandfather in with those functions allowed the kitchen to be used as a place to actually really support events. We do have really 2 phases with our coffee. We've learned that the first is just the quick and easy. We have like a very nice like Keurig kind of a setup if people just want their glass. I'm not a coffee drinker. I call myself like the blind artist because I'll make someone coffee, but I never drink it. But so we have the coffee setup. We have I make sun tea in a huge just 10 or 5 gallon thing that allows people to just quickly access like coffee and tea and snacks. But we also have a setup to do pour overs, to do a little bit more in-depth making of coffee, as well as the tea. It's all loose leaf tea. And so if people want to have like a little bit of a premium, we also have that ability to do, the pour over, the AeroPress, or the Chemex, just the styles that allow for the coffee to have, I guess, more of a robust flavor, but also just open up like a water cooler like experience. And so for me, like as a host, anyone's first week coming in here, I treat them, I give them much more attention than I can to all the other members that have been here. And so I'll always set aside and say, hey, let me make you a coffee here, and it opens up a window of 5 minutes, right? And that 5 minutes allows for just a time that's dedicated towards just getting to know each other. So it's nice to have the quick and easy. It's also nice to have the more in-depth, this is an active service type of experience.
I really like your idea of that, let me the 5 minutes.
Hmm.
Especially if it's a new member, you will take your own sweet time, boil extra water, take some.
Hmm.
Oh man, you're a smart guy. Cool. Cool. So we got the coffee out of my thing. Architecture we're done. So how has the community reacted to this whole church um, being used? I mean, are you surrounded by residential area or is it commercial, local community?
Yeah, so we're residential, which again allows people to just to walk here from their homes. So that was again a part of the purpose is just we like the slogan that I came up was creating time, relationships, and purpose to flourish. And people say, well, how do you create time? And I say, well, if people can just feel more not just efficient, but can just walk here and have a different frame of mind than driving to the office or sitting in traffic, that creates time for that person, right? So the uniqueness against of these institutions, these churches, a lot of times they're actually embedded in the local residential community. So we're surrounded by houses, and because of that, we've done a lot of work to try to just allow the neighbors to feel like their purpose here is wanted. Because we don't want to rub shoulders with neighbors in a negative way. It's known that at least here there's been instances of churches creating new purposes and their neighbors not being on board and saying, hey, look, you're creating more traffic and noise, and we don't understand what you're doing. And so we've been very forward thinking with first going to our neighbors and trying to get them to understand that this is we want to be a resource for them. And I can get into legal issues with that too. Like I've done a lot of research because anytime you repurpose a space, you have to think through zoning and permitting and tax law and those things. So I've had to do some research because this is just a new concept, but it's one that's completely possible. It just comes with being very, very very, very intentional about building relationships with people that are going to be affected by it. So,
I think this thing nicely segues into my next question, which is obviously the hopefully the last question, which is I'm sure someone is going to get inspired, for, but after watching our discussion, and will think of opening up a co-working space or some form of community in a church or
mm,
another religious institution, right? Depending
yep,
on whatever the faith that person comes from. Now, you also touched on, there are some legal permitting zoning issues. So I think the next question would be, and hopefully this is the last one, is what would be your advice for someone who's thinking of starting up something like this? Where should they start? What should they look out and touch on some of the legal zoning issues? I mean, we don't have to go too deep, but at least give them some idea so that they can start researching that way.
mm. Yeah. So I'm happy to be a resource for anyone that's inspired to try to do this. I can give my contact information, but this is a passion of mine that I have, no financial, winnings in. It's more just I see a huge purpose here. So happy to be a resource and answer questions that I can't get to right now. I think there's really, it's really an overall issue of perception, and I say it like that because internally with these institutions, you have to work towards what's the meaning of them, and not being threatening to say, well, look, like this isn't a Sunday morning quote unquote kind of activity, but it's still something that I believe that the church should be doing, right? And so there's a lot of language that is really helpful with that, to get church constituents on board to say, yeah, we would love to be this for our community, right? So that's one area of I would say like a form of legalism that you have to work with within the institution. Externally, there's the perception of, yeah, what should the church be as well, right? And so that comes down to, like I mentioned, zoning and permitting and tax issues. And so you have to do research. It's going to be very unique to the location. So looking up the zoning of that church by the county and what it says that space is, there's, like you mentioned, there's a big difference between commercial, residential, and the purpose that the city has said this is what you're meant to be, and this is what you can do. You might have to look into getting conditional use permit to say, do we have permission to do this different use? Or it might say you're not able to do this at all, and at that point, I can help with the creativity that you have to use in order to get around what seems to be a roadblock to co-working, but turns out just to be a new opportunity of saying we're doing co-working in many things that are looked at as ministries of this church. And I've found that the city is usually much more open to that conversation than, oh, they're just looking at creating office space and profiteering off the community, right? So that takes a lot of actually building relationships with the city council even. So it goes a step further than I think other co-working spaces, and saying, look, how are we interpreting these laws? Maybe we need to look at them differently. I think that things have changed since they were first written 50 years ago. Right, and then there's tax issues you have to consider. You mentioned churches are nonprofits, and so the way that you receive money is of consideration, whether it's in line with the mission of the church and can be defended as so, or it's looked at as outside that mission. And just like any nonprofit, if you're taking in money outside the mission, it's going to be taxable. But my argument is would you rather have $85 after tax, or not make any money at all? If someone gives you $100, you get 15% tax, you get 85 still, right? So that is an issue. There's also an issue around property tax, and that's the last thing I'd say is property tax. Churches are exempt from, and so just again, language is really helpful with understanding how to kind of work through that issue, and when also the church was founded, it's different by state and how states look at property taxes and on these things.
Well, I got excited then. You brought up all these issues, and I was like, However, anyone who is considering opening up a co-working space or some form of community space in a church, my suggestion, and again, I'm not saying this because Brandon is on the call, but I would say, go reach out to Brandon, talk to him, engage with him, because, you will save months and months of, or if not months, weeks of hard work, because he has already navigated these waters. It may be only in Palo Alto, but he still knows the lay of the land, like where to start, what to do. So with that, I will end the call here. Brandon, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me. I learned a lot. And I didn't know that this could be a possibility, but while it may sound a little bit daunting, but I know who to reach out to if I do want to open up space in the church. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.